After losing his memory, a veteran and his dog followed the wind to a miracle house on the cliff. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The night was colder than usual, the kind of chill that clung to your bones and made you feel like the world had forgotten how to warm itself. The wind was relentless, howling through the barren streets like a lost soul searching for something it could never find. In the midst of this fierce storm, a man walked along the roadside, his every step heavy with the weight of memories he could not recall. Nolan Creed, a former Army combat engineer, had seen his share of battles, but nothing had prepared him for the one that had left him with no memory of his past. It had been months since the accident, the one that had wiped away his past, leaving only fragments of images and feelings he could not piece together. Nolan did not remember his family, his friends, or even the reason why he had ended up on this desolate stretch of road with nothing but a backpack and his loyal dog, Ash. Ash, a 6-year-old German shepherd, had been with him through every step of his journey. The dog, with his gray and cream coat and sharp amber eyes, had a sense of loyalty that Nolan couldn't explain. Ash had been trained to detect explosives, but in Nolan's world, he was the one thing that kept him tethered to the reality of the present. The storm made it hard to see, but the wind seemed to push them forward, as though urging them to keep moving, to go somewhere, anywhere. Nolan felt like he was following the wind, walking in a direction he couldn't understand but knew he had to follow. It was as if the storm, with its endless howl, was guiding them. Nolan wasn't sure what he was searching for, but something deep inside told him he wasn't alone on this journey. He glanced at Ash, who had a focused look in his eyes, his body tense, alert to something Nolan couldn't sense. The dog pulled gently at his leash, as if urging Nolan to keep up the pace. Then, through the veil of snow, Nolan saw it. A faint glow in the distance, like a beacon calling to him. He squinted, trying to make sense of it, but the storm was too intense, and his mind too foggy to trust his instincts fully. The glow, however, was unmistakable. It was a house. There, nestled on the edge of a cliff, stood a small cottage, its windows glowing warmly against the dark sky. It seemed so out of place in the middle of nowhere, so untouched by the storm that it could have been a mirage. Nolan felt a pull toward it, a connection he couldn't explain, but one he couldn't ignore. With Ash by his side, he moved toward the house, each step bringing them closer to something, though he wasn't sure what. As they approached, the wind seemed to die down, and the snow lightened, as if the world itself was giving them a moment of peace. The house stood there, quiet and still, as though waiting for them. Ash's ears perked up, and he let out a soft whine, his body relaxing as if he had been expecting this moment all along. Nolan reached out, his hand trembling slightly as he touched the doorknob. It felt warm, welcoming, almost as if the house itself had been waiting for them to arrive. With a deep breath, he turned the knob and stepped inside, the door creaking open with a sound that felt like the house was finally breathing after years of silence. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old wood and something else, something comforting, like home. Nolan's heart raced as he looked around. The house was simple, yet there was something extraordinary about it, as if it had been untouched by time. The floorboards creaked under his weight as he moved deeper into the room. Ash sniffed around the corner, his eyes alert, his body tense once again. The house, like the wind that had guided them, was filled with secrets, and Nolan could feel that, just like his journey, the answers would reveal themselves soon enough. But for now, they had found shelter from the storm. The warmth of the house wrapped around them, and for the first time in a long while, Nolan felt something he had forgotten, the feeling of being home. As Nolan stepped deeper into the house, he felt an odd sense of peace settle over him. The wind that had been howling outside had disappeared, replaced by a stillness that seemed almost sacred. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, casting flickering shadows against the stone walls. Ash, ever the loyal companion, padded quietly beside him, his nose twitching as he explored the corners of the room. Nolan took a deep breath, the scent of old wood, and something faintly sweet filling his lungs. It felt like the house had been waiting for him, as if it knew he was coming. The warmth of the hearth wrapped around him, comforting him in a way he hadn't felt in months. His mind was still a blur, memories scattered and elusive, but for the first time since the accident, he didn't feel completely lost. He felt grounded, like he belonged in this strange place. He walked slowly through the small living room, taking in the details. The furniture was simple, but it had a lived-in feel. The walls were lined with bookshelves, each shelf cluttered with old books and odd trinkets. There was a large portrait hanging above the fireplace, a faded painting of a woman with kind eyes. Her expression seemed to follow Nolan as he moved, her gaze warm and inviting. The room was quiet, save for the soft crackling of the fire, and Nolan found himself sitting down in a worn armchair by the hearth. Ash curled up at his feet, his eyes alert but relaxed, as if the dog had finally found the peace he'd been seeking. As Nolan sat there, his thoughts began to drift. He couldn't remember much about his past, but something about the house seemed familiar. It wasn't just the warmth or the comforting presence of Ash. It was the feeling that this place was somehow connected to him. A faint memory stirred in the back of his mind, a whisper of something long forgotten. He shook his head, trying to focus. He couldn't dwell on the past. There was too much he didn't remember. But there was something about the house, about the way it made him feel, that made him wonder if perhaps it was more than just a place of refuge. Maybe it was a place of answers. As the evening wore on, Nolan became more aware of the quiet hum of the house. It wasn't the sound of the wind or the creaking of the wood. It was something deeper, something that seemed to resonate with the very air around him. It was as if the house itself was alive, breathing in the same rhythm as Nolan. His fingers absently traced the armrest of the chair, the wood smooth under his touch. He closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the subtle vibrations in the air. That's when he heard it, something soft, like a distant whisper. It was faint at first, just a fluttering of sound, but it grew stronger, more distinct. Nolan's heart quickened. He opened his eyes, looking around the room. Ash stirred at his feet, his ears twitching. The dog's body was tense, his eyes locked on a spot near the far corner of the room. Nolan stood, his legs stiff from sitting too long, and walked cautiously toward the sound. As he approached the corner, the whisper grew louder, almost as if it were calling to him. He reached out and touched the wall, the cool stone solid under his hand. The whisper stopped. For a moment, the silence was deafening. Then, slowly, the wall in front of him began to shift. It wasn't anything dramatic, just a subtle movement, like a hidden door was opening. Nolan stepped back, his breath caught in his throat. Ash's low growl broke the silence, his hackles raised. Nolan took a deep breath and stepped forward, pressing his hand against the shifting wall. The stone was warm now, almost alive beneath his fingertips. With a soft creak, the wall moved aside, revealing a narrow passageway leading deeper into the house. Nolan hesitated for a moment, his heart pounding in his chest. There was something waiting for him down there. He could feel it. The house wasn't just a shelter. It was a mystery, one that was beginning to unfold. Ash, as always, was by his side, his amber eyes shining with the same curiosity that Nolan felt deep within himself. Together, they stepped into the passageway, the air colder now, carrying a scent of earth and age. The passage was narrow, the walls rough stone, and the further they went, the more the air seemed to hum with energy. They came to a small chamber, dimly lit by a single candle burning in the corner. In the center of the room was a small wooden table, and upon it sat an object wrapped in cloth. Nolan moved closer, his hand trembling as he reached for the cloth. As he unwrapped it, his eyes widened in shock. It was a small, intricately carved box, the kind of thing he had seen before, but he couldn't remember where. It was old, the wood worn smooth with time, and it had a strange symbol etched into its surface. Nolan's mind raced as he stared at the box. It felt important, like it held the key to something he had forgotten. His fingers brushed the symbol, and for a split second, a flood of memories hit him, flashes of his past, of a time before the accident. They were fleeting, like shadows in the dark, but they were enough to make his heart ache. He quickly shut his eyes, trying to hold onto the fragments, but they slipped away as quickly as they had come. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. This box, whatever it was, had something to do with his past. With a final glance at Ash, who was watching him intently, Nolan opened the box. Inside was a small, folded piece of paper. He unfolded it carefully, his heart pounding. The handwriting on the paper was familiar, but he couldn't place it. As he read the words, the world seemed to go still around him. The message was simple, but it carried the weight of something profound. You are not lost. You are found. Nolan's breath caught in his throat. The words seemed to echo in his mind, repeating over and over. The message, whatever it meant, was clear. He was meant to be here. The house, the wind, Ash, they were all part of something larger, something he was only beginning to understand. As Nolan held the small piece of paper, the words seemed to pulse with an energy of their own, like a hidden rhythm that had been waiting for him to discover it. You are not lost. You are found. The simple message echoed in his mind, resonating deep within his chest. It felt like a truth he had known all along, but had been unable to grasp until now. He stood in the dimly lit chamber, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows on the stone walls. Ash, who had been quietly observing, let out a soft whine, as if sensing the significance of the moment. Nolan looked down at his dog, the bond between them deepening with every passing day. In this strange house, in this mysterious place, they were not just survivors. They were part of something larger, something far more profound. Nolan took a slow breath, his fingers still resting on the edge of the small wooden box. He had come here searching for shelter, for peace, but now he realized that the house was offering him something far more valuable: answers. He could feel the weight of the past pressing on him, the memories that had slipped through his fingers now beckoning him forward. He turned the box over in his hands, running his thumb along the intricate carvings. The symbol etched into the wood seemed familiar, but he couldn't place it. It was a sign of something, a marker, and Nolan was certain that it was connected to his lost memories. With a deep breath, he closed the box and stood up, his legs stiff from kneeling on the cold stone floor. Ash stood beside him, his eyes alert, his body poised as if ready for whatever might come next. Nolan turned toward the narrow passageway they had come through and began walking back the way they had entered. The house was quiet now, the strange hum that had filled the air earlier gone. It was as if the house was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. As Nolan walked through the rooms, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him, waiting for him to uncover its secrets. He moved through the kitchen, past the worn wooden table and the faded cabinets, his footsteps echoing in the silence. He stopped in front of the fireplace, where the flames had long since burned out. There was something about the hearth, something about the space around it, that felt familiar. He crouched down, examining the area carefully. The stone floor was cold to the touch, but as his fingers brushed along the edge of the hearth, he felt a slight give, a subtle shift. His heart skipped a beat. He pressed harder, his fingers searching for the hidden mechanism, and then, with a soft click, a hidden compartment opened at the base of the hearth. Inside was a small leather pouch. Nolan's breath caught in his throat. He reached for it, his hands trembling slightly as he pulled it free. The pouch was old, worn with age, but it felt strangely warm in his hands. He untied the string and opened it, revealing a collection of small items: an old key, a tarnished ring, and a folded piece of paper. Nolan's pulse quickened as he examined the key. It was unlike anything he had ever seen before, ornate and intricate, with symbols carved into its surface. The ring was just as mysterious, a simple band of silver with a strange, glowing stone embedded in the center. It radiated a soft, calming light, as if it had a power all its own. He looked at the folded piece of paper, and his heart skipped a beat. This time, the handwriting was different, more hurried, more urgent. As he read the words, he felt a shiver run down his spine. Find the truth, and you will remember. The key unlocks the path. The message was cryptic, but it felt like a direct call to him, urging him to take action, to follow whatever this was. He carefully folded the paper back up and placed it in his pocket. The items felt important, like they held the answers he had been searching for. He stood there for a moment, his thoughts racing. He had to know what these items meant. The house, the wind, the messages, everything seemed to be leading him to something, to some greater purpose he couldn't yet understand. Ash let out another low growl, his body tense and alert. as if sensing that they were on the cusp of discovering something monumental. Nolan nodded, his resolve strengthening. He couldn't ignore this any longer. He had to follow the path, wherever it might lead. As he turned to leave the room, the wind outside began to pick up again, swirling through the trees with a fierce intensity. It felt different this time, more purposeful, as if it were guiding him towards something. He could hear it clearly now. The wind was calling to him, just as it had when he first arrived. It was time to move forward. Nolan walked toward the door, Ash following closely behind. As he stepped outside, the wind greeted him, its icy fingers brushing against his skin. The storm had passed, but the air was thick with anticipation. The house behind him stood silent and still, its secrets waiting to be uncovered. Nolan and Ash stepped into the unknown, the wind at their backs, guiding them toward whatever awaited them on the other side. As Nolan stepped into the cold night, the wind swirled around him, guiding him forward, as if it knew the path he needed to take. The air was crisp, biting, and every step felt like it was carrying him deeper into a mystery he had only just begun to understand. Ash walked beside him, his head held high, his eyes scanning the dark landscape, every muscle in his body taut with alertness. The bond between Nolan and his dog had always been strong, but now, with the strange events unfolding around them, it felt even more unbreakable. The wind seemed to be a constant companion, pushing them onward, urging them to keep going. Nolan glanced back at the house they had left behind. It loomed in the distance, a silhouette against the dark sky. It was a house that had offered shelter, warmth, and answers, but now it felt like a memory, something that belonged to a different time, a time before the winds began to call. With a deep breath, Nolan pressed forward, determined to follow the wind wherever it would lead him. The path ahead was uncertain, but he had learned to trust his instincts, and something deep inside told him that he was on the right track. As he walked, the landscape around him began to shift. The rolling hills that had once seemed so expansive now gave way to a dense forest. The trees were tall and ancient, their branches swaying in the breeze. The moonlight filtered through the canopy, casting long shadows on the ground, and the forest felt alive, as if it were watching them. The air grew thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. Every step they took felt like a step further into a forgotten world, one that held secrets Nolan could not yet understand. Ash paused for a moment, his ears perked up, his body tense. Nolan stopped too, his heart skipping a beat as he scanned the area. The wind had died down, and in the silence, they both seemed to be listening to something just beyond their reach. Then, from somewhere deep in the forest, a faint sound echoed. It was a soft, melodic hum, like a song carried on the wind. Nolan's heart raced. He had no idea what it was, but it felt like a call, a beckoning from the depths of the forest. Without thinking, he started walking toward the sound. Ash followed closely behind, his tail stiff, his body alert. The hum grew louder with every step they took, and soon, they found themselves at the base of a cliff. The ground here was rocky, the trees thinning out as they reached the edge. At the top of the cliff stood something that made Nolan stop in his tracks. It was a small cabin, tucked away in the trees, its windows glowing with a warm, inviting light. The cabin seemed out of place, as though it had been forgotten by time. There was no sign of a road leading to it, no indication that anyone had been here in years. Yet, there it stood, waiting. Nolan's breath caught in his throat. This was no ordinary cabin. There was something about it, something that resonated with the very air around him. It was as if the cabin itself was alive, breathing in sync with the wind, the trees, and the earth. He moved toward it, his feet heavy with the weight of the moment. Ash was at his side, his eyes focused on the cabin, his body tense. The closer they got, the more Nolan felt the pull of the place. It was like the wind had led him here, like the hum had been a message, a guide. As they reached the door, Nolan hesitated. He wasn't sure what he was about to find inside, but he knew he had to go in. With a deep breath, he turned the handle and pushed the door open. The air inside was warm, and the faint scent of wood and something floral filled his nostrils. The cabin was small but cozy, with a fireplace in the corner and simple furniture scattered around the room. A worn rug lay on the floor, and shelves lined the walls, filled with books and odd trinkets. But it wasn't the furniture that caught Nolan's attention. It was the light. The room was bathed in a soft, golden glow that seemed to come from nowhere. It was the kind of light that made everything feel peaceful, as though time itself had slowed down in this little corner of the world. As Nolan stepped inside, he felt a rush of warmth, not just from the fire, but from something deeper, something he couldn't quite explain. Ash trotted in behind him, his eyes scanning the room, but there was no sign of anyone. The cabin felt empty, yet full, as though it was waiting for him. Nolan slowly made his way across the room, his heart pounding in his chest. He felt drawn to the far wall, where a small table sat beneath a window. On the table, there was an old book, its cover worn and faded with age. He reached for it, his fingers brushing the pages as he opened it. The writing inside was delicate, the ink slightly faded, but the words were clear. As he read, he realized that the book was more than just a collection of stories. It was a record, a history, one that seemed to speak directly to him. The pages detailed events, people, and places that were strangely familiar, as though they had been a part of his life, a life he had forgotten. The wind outside began to pick up again, and Nolan looked out the window. The trees were swaying in the breeze, the branches twisting in patterns that seemed to mirror the words in the book. It was then that he realized, the wind, the house, the book, it was all connected. This place wasn't just a shelter. It was a key, a piece of the puzzle he had been trying to solve since the day he had lost his memory. And for the first time since the accident, Nolan felt like he was finally beginning to understand what had happened and why he had been brought here. As Nolan continued to read the old book, the room around him seemed to fade, as though time itself was slowing down, leaving only the words and the faint sound of the wind outside. The golden glow from the fireplace flickered, casting long shadows on the walls, but he couldn't tear his eyes away from the pages. It was as if the book was speaking to him, not just through the stories it held, but through the emotions it stirred within him. Each word brought a memory back to the surface, memories he had long since buried, faces, places, and events that felt both distant and familiar. Nolan paused for a moment, letting the flood of emotions wash over him. There was a sense of something larger at play, something he couldn't yet fully grasp but knew was guiding him, like the steady pull of the wind he had been following since he arrived. He turned another page, his fingers trembling slightly as he did. The next few pages were filled with detailed accounts of the house and its history. It had been built decades ago by a family who had lived in solitude, much like Nolan, seeking refuge from the outside world. They had left behind a legacy of peace and healing, creating a place that felt untouched by time. As he read, Nolan realized that this house was not just a home. It was a sanctuary, a place that had been waiting for him. The more he read, the more he understood. The house had been built with a purpose that Nolan was only beginning to uncover. It was a place where people came to find themselves, to heal from the wounds of their past. And now, it was his turn. As he read on, the final pages of the book revealed a shocking revelation. The house was not just a place of refuge. It was a place where miracles happened, where lives were changed. There was a legend, passed down through the generations, that anyone who stayed in the house long enough would be granted a gift, a blessing that would change their life forever. Nolan felt a chill run down his spine. This was no ordinary place. The house, the wind, the book, it was all connected, and now he understood that he was a part of something much bigger than himself. He closed the book gently, his mind racing with the possibilities. The wind outside had picked up again, howling through the trees with an intensity that matched the pounding of his heart. It was as if the house itself was calling to him, urging him to take the next step, to find the answer he had been searching for all along. With a deep breath, Nolan stood up, his legs stiff from sitting too long. Ash, ever the loyal companion, stood by his side, his amber eyes focused on Nolan as if waiting for him to make the next move. Without a word, Nolan nodded to his dog, and together they stepped out of the cabin, the door creaking shut behind them. The air was colder now, the night sky clear and full of stars. The wind had settled into a steady breeze, carrying with it a sense of purpose. As Nolan and Ash walked back toward the edge of the cliff, Nolan felt a sense of calm wash over him. The answers were within reach, and he could feel that he was being guided toward them, step by step. As they reached the cliff's edge, Nolan stopped, gazing out over the landscape. The valley below stretched out for miles, the trees swaying gently in the wind. It was peaceful, but there was something more to it, something that Nolan couldn't quite explain. It was as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for him to make the next move. The sound of the wind grew louder again, rising from the depths of the forest. It was the same hum he had heard earlier, and Nolan realized that it was calling to him once more. This time, the sound wasn't distant. It was right here, in the very air around him. Nolan took a deep breath and closed his eyes, listening to the wind. It seemed to speak to him, guiding him towards something unknown but certain. He opened his eyes, and there, in the distance, he saw a light. It was faint at first, but as he focused on it, it grew brighter, shining like a beacon in the night. It was a light of hope, of answers, and of something greater than himself. Without hesitation, Nolan began walking toward the light. Ash followed at his side, his body relaxed but alert. The wind picked up again, as if pushing him forward, urging him to keep moving. With every step, Nolan felt a sense of peace settle deeper within him. The journey he had started, the search for answers, was about to lead him to something life-changing. As he walked, the light grew brighter, and Nolan knew that he was finally on the path that had been waiting for him all along. This was the moment. The house, the wind, the book, it had all been leading him here. And as he stepped forward, he could feel the miracle unfolding before him. As Nolan walked toward the growing light, his heart quickened with every step. The light was no longer a distant glow, but a steady, bright beacon that cut through the darkness of the forest. The wind had settled into a gentle breeze, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for him to reach his destination. Ash walked alongside him, his tail low, his eyes alert but calm. The dog's presence was a constant comfort, and Nolan couldn't help but feel that, together, they were meant to be here, at this moment. The path was narrow, winding through the thick forest, but with each step, Nolan felt an overwhelming sense of clarity. He wasn't sure what was waiting for him, but he knew it was something important, something that would change everything. The closer they got to the light, the more Nolan could feel the pull of it, like it was calling to him, urging him to come closer. He wasn't alone in this journey. The house, the wind, Ash, they were all part of something larger, something he couldn't fully understand, but knew was guiding him. As they reached the clearing where the light stood, Nolan stopped. He took a deep breath and let the moment sink in. The air was still, the only sound being the soft rustle of leaves and the distant hum of the wind. The light was coming from an old, stone structure in the middle of the clearing. It wasn't a house, not quite, but it was a building, something ancient, worn with time. The stone walls were covered with ivy, and there was a large wooden door at the entrance. The light was coming from within, casting a golden glow that seemed to radiate warmth and peace. Nolan's pulse quickened. This was it. The thing he had been searching for. The thing the wind had led him to. He stepped forward, his hand reaching for the door. It was heavy, the wood worn smooth with age, but as he touched it, it opened with a soft creak, almost as if it had been waiting for him. Inside was a vast chamber, the walls lined with shelves filled with old books and trinkets. In the center of the room was a large table, covered with maps and papers, all scattered across its surface. A large window at the far end of the room allowed the moonlight to spill in, casting long shadows across the room. The atmosphere was thick with history, with secrets that had been waiting for someone to discover them. As Nolan stepped further into the room, he could feel the weight of the place, the power that seemed to resonate from the very walls. There was something here, something that had been hidden away for a long time. He moved toward the table, his footsteps echoing in the stillness. The maps and papers on the table seemed to be a record, a collection of information that tied the house, the wind, and the mysterious events together. As he sifted through the papers, he found one that caught his eye. It was an old, yellowed letter, its edges frayed with age. The handwriting was elegant, flowing with a sense of purpose that immediately drew him in. Nolan unfolded the letter carefully, his fingers trembling as he read the words. To the one who finds this, know that you are not the first to seek the truth. This house has been built with a purpose, to protect and to guide. The wind is the key, and the path you walk is the one that has been chosen for you. Follow it, and you will find what you seek. But beware, for not all answers are meant to be found. Nolan's heart raced as he read the letter again. The words seemed to speak directly to him, as if they had been written just for him. This was no coincidence. He was meant to be here, and the journey he had started was leading him towards something much bigger than he had ever imagined. But the warning at the end of the letter gave him pause. Not all answers are meant to be found. What did that mean? Was there something more to this house, to this place, that he didn't understand? As he pondered the letter's meaning, Ash let out a low growl, his body stiffening. Nolan turned to look at the dog, his senses immediately heightened. Ash was focused on something in the corner of the room, his eyes locked on a small, hidden doorway that Nolan hadn't noticed before. It was tucked away behind a bookshelf, nearly invisible in the dim light. The door was old, its wood dark and worn, and there was no handle. Just a small, intricate symbol carved into the surface. Nolan walked toward the door, his breath catching in his throat. This was it, the next step. The wind had led him here, and now, the house was showing him the way forward. As his hand brushed against the door, it creaked open, revealing a narrow, winding staircase leading downward. Nolan hesitated for only a moment before stepping inside. Ash followed closely behind, his body tense with anticipation. The staircase spiraled down into darkness, the air growing colder as they descended. The walls were made of stone, rough and uneven, and the only sound was the soft echo of their footsteps. As they reached the bottom of the stairs, Nolan's heart raced. What was waiting for him down here? What secrets did the house hold? He didn't know, but he was ready to find out. The door at the bottom of the stairs opened into a large chamber, and the first thing Nolan noticed was the smell. It was rich, earthy, like fresh rain on the earth, mixed with the faint scent of something floral. As his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he saw what lay before him, a large stone altar covered with symbols and markings. It was ancient, older than anything Nolan had seen before, and standing before it, bathed in soft light, was a figure. A woman, dressed in flowing robes, her face serene and calm. She was holding something in her hands, an object Nolan couldn't yet see. The woman looked up as Nolan and Ash entered, her eyes meeting his with a knowing gaze. "You've come," she said, her voice soft, almost a whisper. "I've been waiting for you." The words sent a shiver down Nolan's spine. He had no idea who this woman was, but somehow, he knew she was the key to everything. The answers he had been searching for were just within reach. As Nolan stepped closer to the stone altar, his heart began to race, the air thick with anticipation. The woman who stood before him, draped in flowing robes, regarded him with calm eyes, as if she knew exactly who he was and why he had come. Her presence was both calming and powerful, and Nolan felt an overwhelming sense of trust in her, as though she had been guiding him all along. Ash, ever vigilant, stayed close by Nolan's side, his amber eyes focused on the woman, his body stiff with alertness. Nolan reached out, instinctively, toward the altar, his fingers brushing the ancient symbols etched into the stone. They were intricate and deep, as if they had been carved by hands long forgotten. The symbols seemed to glow faintly under his touch, their energy pulsating, drawing him in. The woman spoke, her voice soft but firm, breaking the silence that had enveloped them. "You have come seeking answers, but you must first understand what you are truly searching for." Nolan's breath caught in his throat. He had been searching for so long. Answers about his past, the accident, the memories that had slipped away. He had been following the wind, the path that seemed to open up before him, leading him to this very moment. But now, with the woman's words, he realized that there was something more, something deeper than he had imagined. "I don't know what I'm looking for," Nolan admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I know I can't stop until I find it." The woman nodded, her gaze unwavering, as if she could see straight into his soul. "The truth is not always what we expect it to be," she said. "It can be both a gift and a burden. Are you prepared to face it?" Nolan felt a wave of uncertainty wash over him. The weight of her words settled in his chest, a mixture of fear and determination. He wasn't sure what the truth would look like, but he knew that he couldn't turn back now. His journey had led him here, and he had to see it through. "I'm ready," he said, the words more confident than he felt. The woman smiled gently, as if she had been waiting for him to say those words. She stepped aside, revealing the object she had been holding in her hands, a small, ornate key. It was crafted from silver, its surface engraved with symbols that mirrored the ones on the altar. The key seemed to shimmer in the soft light, as if it held some kind of power. "This is the key to your past," she said. "It will unlock the memories you have lost. But be warned, what you uncover may change everything." Nolan reached out, his fingers brushing the cool metal of the key. As soon as his skin made contact, a surge of energy coursed through him, sending a shiver down his spine. It was as if the key had awakened something deep within him, something he had long forgotten. "Where do I use it?" he asked, his voice filled with awe and uncertainty. The woman pointed toward a stone door on the far side of the room, hidden in the shadows. It was large and imposing, covered in the same intricate symbols that adorned the altar. "That door holds the answers you seek," she said. "The key will open it, but you must be prepared for what lies beyond." Nolan nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't know what awaited him behind that door, but he knew he had to face it. He took the key in his hand, feeling its weight, and walked toward the door. Ash followed closely behind, his paws silent on the stone floor. When he reached the door, Nolan placed the key into the lock, and it turned with a soft click, as if it had been waiting for him. Slowly, the door creaked open, revealing a dark passageway that seemed to stretch on forever. A chill ran through Nolan's body as he stepped inside. The air was thick with dust, and the faint scent of earth and time lingered in the air. The passage was narrow, the walls rough and cold to the touch. As he moved further into the darkness, the faint sound of whispers seemed to echo through the stone. Nolan's breath quickened. The whispers grew louder, more distinct, as if they were trying to tell him something. He paused for a moment, his heart racing. The air felt charged with energy, the weight of the past pressing down on him. He wasn't sure if he was ready for whatever lay ahead, but he knew he had no choice but to continue. The whispers guided him, leading him deeper into the passage. As he walked, the walls seemed to close in around him, the darkness swallowing him whole. The further he went, the more he felt the pull of the past, the memories that had been locked away for so long. Finally, he reached the end of the passage, where a stone pedestal stood. On it rested a small, weathered box, its surface covered in symbols. The whispers grew louder, urging him to open it. With trembling hands, Nolan reached for the box, the weight of the moment heavy in his chest. He lifted the lid slowly, and inside, he found a collection of old photographs and letters, yellowed with age. As he sifted through the contents, his heart stopped. The faces in the photographs were familiar, his own family, his friends, the people he had loved. He could see himself in the pictures, a younger version of himself, smiling and happy. But the letters were what caught his attention. They were addressed to him, written in a handwriting he recognized, yet couldn't place. The words seemed to reach out to him, calling him back to a time he had forgotten. As he read the first letter, everything began to fall into place. The memories flooded back, one after another, like a tidal wave crashing over him. The accident, the loss, the pain, it all came rushing back. But so did the love, the joy, the life he had once known. He wasn't just a man lost in time. He was a man with a past, with a story, and now, he was ready to remember it all. As Nolan sat in the dimly lit chamber, surrounded by the old photographs and letters, a flood of emotions surged through him. The images of his past, of his family and friends, were now clear in his mind. Faces he had forgotten, memories long buried, all coming back in a rush. He could see himself in the pictures, smiling, carefree, before everything changed. The accident, the trauma that wiped away so much, now felt like a distant echo, a shadow of the life he once knew. His fingers trembled as he held the letters, the handwriting so familiar, yet so foreign. It was as if a part of him had been locked away, hidden from view for so long, and now, finally, the door had been unlocked. As he read the letters, the words began to fill in the gaps, connecting the pieces of his fragmented past. The letters spoke of love, of loss, of a family torn apart by circumstances beyond their control. But they also spoke of hope, of a promise that no matter how far he strayed, he would always be found. The words were like a lifeline, pulling him back to who he was meant to be. Nolan closed his eyes for a moment, letting the weight of the past settle over him. He felt the pain, the grief, but also something more, something powerful, something that had been waiting for him to discover. It was a sense of purpose, a feeling that this journey, this path he had been walking, had led him here for a reason. He wasn't lost anymore. He was found. The air in the chamber seemed to hum with energy, as if the very walls were alive with the power of the past. The whispers, which had been quiet before, now grew louder, more distinct, filling the space with an almost tangible presence. The wind outside had picked up again, its howling now seeming to echo the sound of his heart, which beat faster with every passing second. Nolan knew that he couldn't stay here forever, that the answers he had found were only the beginning. The house, the wind, the symbols, it was all leading him somewhere that held the key to the next part of his journey. He stood up slowly, his mind made up. He had come this far, and now, he had to keep moving forward. Ash, ever the loyal companion, stood by his side, his eyes alert but calm, as if he too understood the weight of the moment. Together, they turned and walked toward the narrow doorway that had appeared in the stone wall, the one that had been hidden from view until now. The door opened with a low creak, revealing another passageway, one that seemed to stretch out before them, shrouded in darkness. Nolan felt a surge of energy, a pull toward the unknown. This was it. The next step, the next chapter in the story that had been unfolding before him. The path was uncertain, but Nolan knew that he had to walk it, that it was his destiny to follow it. As they moved down the passageway, the air grew colder, the silence deepening with every step. The walls seemed to close in around him, but there was a sense of safety in the confinement, as if the house was wrapping him in its embrace, guiding him towards something he needed to see. The further they went, the more Nolan felt the weight of his purpose pressing down on him. The memories, the letters, the symbols, they were all leading him to this place. As they reached the end of the passage, Nolan stopped. There, in the distance, was another door. This one was larger, more ornate, and it seemed to shimmer with a soft, ethereal light. It was as if it was waiting for him, waiting to reveal the final piece of the puzzle. Nolan reached out and touched the door, and it opened with ease, as if it had been unlocked just for him. Beyond the door was a vast room, illuminated by a light that came from no visible source. The room was filled with shelves, each one holding objects and artifacts from ages past. It was a place of history, a place of memory. As Nolan stepped into the room, he felt a rush of emotions, like a floodgate opening inside him. The walls were lined with objects, paintings, trinkets, and relics that told the stories of lives long gone. But it was the center of the room that caught his attention. There, on a pedestal, stood a single object, a mirror. The glass was clear, but there was something unusual about it, something that made Nolan's heart skip a beat. As he stepped closer, the reflection in the mirror began to shift. It wasn't his own reflection that stared back at him, but the images of the past, his family, his friends, the life he had lost. The mirror seemed to show him everything he had forgotten, everything that had been taken from him. Nolan reached out, his hand trembling, and touched the surface of the mirror. The moment his fingers made contact, the reflection changed. He saw himself, older, wiser, but still the same. The man he had become was standing before him, and for the first time, Nolan truly understood. The journey had been about more than finding answers. It had been about finding himself. The mirror had shown him not just his past, but his future. It was a future filled with hope, with healing, and with the strength to move forward. Nolan smiled, the weight of the past finally lifting. The journey wasn't over, but he was no longer lost. The wind had led him here, and now, he was ready for whatever came next. As Nolan stood before the mirror, the weight of everything he had learned so far settled upon him. The reflection that now stared back at him wasn't just a man who had lost his memories. It was someone who had found his way back to himself. The images in the mirror had revealed the past he had lost, but they also showed him the future, his future, one that was still unfolding. The journey he had taken, the one that had led him here, was about much more than rediscovering who he was. It was about finding purpose, about reclaiming the life that had been taken from him. As he stood there, Ash quietly sat beside him, his loyal companion, eyes watching the mirror as if he too understood the significance of the moment. The room around them seemed to hum with a quiet energy, the air thick with the power of the house and the secrets it held. The whispers, which had been faint before, now felt like a presence, wrapping themselves around Nolan, urging him to keep moving forward. The wind outside began to pick up again, But this time it wasn't a force of chaos. It was gentle, almost like a soft guiding hand, pushing him toward what was next. Nolan knew, without a doubt, that the journey wasn't over. He had uncovered the first layer of truth, but there was more to find, more to discover. The key, the mirror, the wind, they had all brought him here, to this place of revelation. But now, he had to take the next step. He stepped away from the mirror, feeling the pull of the unknown once more. Ash followed without hesitation, as always, a steady presence at his side. Together, they moved toward the door at the far end of the room. It was just a simple wooden door, unassuming, yet Nolan felt as though it held the next chapter of his journey behind it. His hand rested on the doorknob, his fingers curling around it, but before he could turn it, the room seemed to shift. The walls, the floor, the air itself, it all felt alive, as though the house itself was watching him, waiting. He hesitated, his heart racing. What was beyond this door? What awaited him on the other side? The whispers intensified, filling the space with a sense of urgency, but also with warmth, as if the house was urging him forward. With a deep breath, Nolan turned the doorknob and pushed the door open. As he stepped through, the world around him seemed to blur, as if he was being pulled into another space, another time. The room beyond was unlike anything he had ever seen before. It was vast, stretching out into an endless horizon, and yet, it felt intimate, as if it had been waiting just for him. The floor beneath his feet was smooth, made of stone, and the walls were adorned with tapestries that seemed to shimmer in the light. The air was thick with a sense of history, of time, as though this place had existed for centuries, yet it felt fresh, untouched by the years. In the center of the room stood an altar, simple but grand, its surface smooth and polished. On it rested a single object, a small, crystal vial filled with a glowing liquid. The light from the vial seemed to radiate warmth, and as Nolan stepped closer, he felt an overwhelming sense of peace wash over him. It was as though the vial held the answer to everything, the key to unlocking the next step in his journey. But just as he reached out to touch it, a voice spoke. It was soft, almost a whisper, but it was clear, and it came from nowhere and everywhere all at once. "The path you walk is yours to choose," the voice said. "But be aware, what you seek may not be what you find." Nolan froze, his hand hovering just above the vial. The words echoed in his mind, and he felt the weight of them. What did it mean? Was he ready to face whatever lay ahead? He glanced at Ash, who stood beside him, his eyes focused on the vial. Nolan had come so far, and yet, there was still so much he didn't understand. The journey had brought him here, to this moment, and now, the decision was his. The voice seemed to understand his hesitation. "Trust in yourself," it said. "The truth is within you, but only if you are willing to accept it." Nolan's heart raced, his mind swirling with questions, but deep down, he knew that he couldn't turn back. He had been searching for so long, and now, the answers were within reach. He took a deep breath and slowly reached for the vial. As his fingers closed around it, a surge of energy flooded his body. The room around him seemed to shift, the light from the vial growing brighter, until it filled the entire space. Nolan's vision blurred for a moment, and then, as quickly as it had come, the light faded. He stood there, holding the vial in his hands, but now, something was different. The world around him had changed. The walls, the floor, the air, all of it felt different, as if the very fabric of reality had shifted. And with that shift, Nolan knew that the next chapter of his journey had begun. As Nolan held the glowing vial in his hands, the world around him seemed to fall away. The light from the vial pulsed softly, filling the room with a warm, comforting glow. The air was thick with the sense that something profound had just occurred, something that could not be undone. He felt a sudden rush of clarity, as if every question, every doubt that had plagued him for so long, was now within reach. His heart was pounding in his chest, and his mind was racing with the realization that his journey had led him here, to this exact moment. He had found something, but what was it? What was he supposed to do with it? As he stood there, holding the vial, he realized that the house, the mirror, the whispers, they had all been part of something much larger than he could have imagined. It wasn't just about finding answers to his past. It was about embracing a future he had long since lost sight of. He looked down at the vial in his hands again, its soft glow reflecting in his eyes. What was inside? He didn't know, but he knew that whatever it was the key to unlocking something far more important than he had thought. The soft hum of energy still filled the room, and Nolan could feel it vibrating in the air around him, like an invisible force pressing him forward. It was as if the house itself was waiting for him to take the next step. With a deep breath, Nolan stepped toward the pedestal at the center of the room. He could feel Ash's presence behind him, the dog's steady gaze a reminder that he was not alone in this. The journey had always been about them, together. He had come so far, and now, with the vial in his hands, he was ready to move forward. As he reached the pedestal, the light from the vial seemed to intensify, shining brighter with every step. He placed it gently on the stone surface, and the moment he let go, the air around him seemed to shift. The soft hum of energy grew louder, vibrating through the floor and up into his chest. The room began to spin, slowly at first, and then faster, as if the very walls were being pulled into another dimension. Nolan staggered, trying to steady himself, but the world around him was twisting and turning, stretching and shrinking, all at once. Ash growled softly beside him, his fur standing on end, but Nolan could feel that they were both safe. The light from the vial grew brighter, and the room seemed to pulse with a rhythmic beat, like the beating of a heart. Suddenly, the spinning stopped. Nolan blinked, his head spinning, and when his eyes refocused, the room had changed. Where once there had been walls and a ceiling, now there was nothing but endless space. The air was thick with the scent of flowers, of earth and wind, and a strange, comforting warmth enveloped him. The ground beneath his feet was soft, like grass, and as he looked around, he saw that he was no longer in the stone chamber. He was standing in a vast, open field, bathed in the light of a setting sun. The sky was a vibrant orange, fading into purple, and the air was still, yet filled with the soft whisper of the wind. For a moment, Nolan couldn't move, unable to comprehend what had just happened. He looked around, his mind racing to catch up with the reality of the situation. Was this another vision, or had he truly been transported somewhere else? Ash barked once, breaking the silence, and Nolan's eyes turned to the dog. Ash was standing at the edge of the field, his nose twitching as he sniffed the air. Nolan walked toward him, his steps slow, tentative. The field stretched out before him, but there was something about it, something that felt familiar. It was as if he had been here before, in another time, another life. The sense of déjà vu was overwhelming, and for a moment, Nolan couldn't tell if he was dreaming or awake. As he reached Ash, the dog turned and began to walk toward a distant hill. Nolan followed without hesitation, his heart pounding with anticipation. As they climbed the hill, the wind picked up again, its whisper now louder, clearer, as if it were speaking to him directly. The hill was covered in wildflowers, their petals swaying gently in the breeze, and the scent of fresh earth filled his lungs. It was beautiful, peaceful, and for the first time in a long while, Nolan felt a deep sense of calm. When they reached the top of the hill, Nolan's breath caught in his throat. In the distance, just beyond the horizon, he saw a familiar shape. A house. It was a small, wooden cabin, standing alone on the edge of a forest. The sight of it made his heart skip a beat. It was the same house, the one he had seen in the mirror, the one that had been calling to him since the beginning. But this time it was real. It was there, waiting for him. As they descended the hill toward the cabin, the whispers of the wind grew stronger, more insistent. It was as if the wind was guiding him, leading him to something important, something he was meant to find. Ash trotted ahead, his tail wagging, as if he knew the way. Nolan quickened his pace, his heart racing with excitement and fear. The cabin loomed closer, its windows glowing with a soft, welcoming light. When they reached the door, Nolan paused, his hand resting on the weathered wood. He could feel the weight of the moment, the weight of everything he had been through to get here. He had come searching for answers, and now, he was finally about to find them. With a deep breath, he pushed the door open and stepped inside. The warmth of the cabin embraced him, and as he looked around, he saw the familiar sights of a home, simple, yet full of life. And there, sitting at the table, was the woman who had been waiting for him. She smiled gently as he entered, her eyes filled with knowing. "You've arrived," she said softly. Now, the journey can truly begin. Nolan's heart swelled with emotion. He had found his way back. He had found his home. As Nolan stepped inside the cabin, the warmth of the room enveloped him like an old friend, and he felt the weight of the world lift from his shoulders. The air smelled of pine and wood, the scent of something ancient and untold, yet oddly comforting. The woman who had been waiting for him was sitting at the table, a faint smile playing on her lips. Her presence was calm, steady, like the stillness of a deep forest that had witnessed the passage of countless years. Her eyes, soft but knowing, met his, and for the first time in a long while, Nolan felt understood. The journey had brought him here, to this moment, and he realized that it wasn't just about finding answers anymore. It was about reclaiming the pieces of himself that he had forgotten. "You've arrived," the woman said, her voice a quiet melody in the stillness of the cabin. "Now, the journey can truly begin." Nolan stood there for a moment, absorbing her words, as though they held a deeper meaning than he could fully grasp. He could feel the weight of her gaze, the weight of the house, and the weight of the answers that still lay ahead. The woman gestured toward the table, inviting him to sit. Without a word, Nolan moved toward the chair, Ash following closely behind, sitting at his feet. As Nolan sat, he noticed a single object resting on the table, an old, weathered book. Its cover was cracked, its edges worn, but there was something familiar about it, something that pulled at his memory. The woman spoke again, her voice soft but purposeful. "This book contains the history of the house, of everything that has led you here. It is a record of the past, but also a guide for what is to come." Nolan reached for the book, his fingers grazing the cover, and as he touched it, a faint pulse of energy shot through his hand, sending a shiver down his spine. The book seemed to hum with life, as if it had been waiting for him, just as the house had. With a deep breath, Nolan opened it, his eyes scanning the first page. The handwriting was elegant, flowing, but the words held a weight that was hard to ignore. "To the one who finds this," he read aloud, his voice low and steady, "know that your path has been chosen. You are not here by chance. The house has led you to this moment, to this place, because you have the strength to see what others cannot. Your journey is one of truth and discovery, but it will require more than courage. It will require understanding." Nolan's mind raced as he read the words. He had known, in his heart, that there was more to this than just rediscovering his past. This house, this place, it had a purpose, and so did he. The journey wasn't just about uncovering the past. It was about embracing the truth, no matter how difficult it might be to face. He turned the page, the paper soft beneath his fingertips. The next passage spoke of the wind, the force that had guided him here. "The wind is the key," the book read. "It carries with it the wisdom of the earth, the voices of those who have passed, and the promise of what is yet to come. To understand its message, you must listen with more than your ears. You must listen with your heart." Nolan's chest tightened as he read the words. He had felt the wind's presence, its pull, its guidance, but now it seemed to carry even more significance. The wind was not just a force of nature. It was a messenger, a guide, a key to the answers he had been seeking. He glanced up at the woman, his mind spinning. "What does it all mean?" he asked, his voice hoarse. She smiled, her eyes soft and knowing. "You already know," she said. "The wind has been leading you all along, Nolan. It has guided you here, to this place, because you are ready to face the truth. The key you hold, the vial you found, it is all part of the journey. Now, you must decide what to do with it." Nolan nodded slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. He had been searching for answers, but now, he realized, the answers were not just in the past. They were in the choices he would make moving forward. The wind, the house, the key, they were all part of a greater plan, one that he was now a part of. He closed the book, feeling its energy course through him, and placed it back on the table. As he did, the room seemed to shift, the air growing heavier, more charged. The woman stood, her presence commanding, yet calm. "The journey is yours now," she said. "You have the tools, the knowledge, and the strength to continue. But remember this, the truth is not always what we expect it to be. Sometimes, it is more than we can understand, but it is always what we need." Nolan stood, feeling the weight of the moment. He was no longer the man who had arrived at this house, lost and broken. He was someone different now, someone ready to face the truth, no matter where it might lead. As Ash stood by his side, Nolan took a deep breath, the wind whispering through the open door, carrying with it the promise of what was to come. The journey wasn't over. It was only just beginning. As Nolan stood there in the warmth of the cabin, the weight of the woman's words lingered in his mind. The journey was his now, but what did that truly mean? What came next? The wind outside had quieted, but its presence was still felt, like a promise of something greater, something waiting just beyond the horizon. Nolan looked at the door, the path that had led him here now standing open before him. The woman had given him the knowledge, the tools, but the choice was his. He could feel the pull of something deeper, something beyond the house and the mystery of the wind. It was calling to him, urging him forward. But to what end? The woman's gaze followed his every movement, calm but unwavering. "You know what you must do," she said softly, her voice carrying a weight of certainty. Nolan met her eyes, his breath catching. "I've found pieces of the past, but I don't know where they lead. How do I know if I'm ready?" She stepped forward, her presence steady and sure. "The past doesn't always give us all the answers. It is only a guide, a reflection of what has been. What lies ahead is yours to shape." Nolan absorbed her words, feeling them settle deep within him. The wind, the house, the key, the vial, they had all been part of the puzzle. But now, the final piece was in his hands, and the next chapter was his to write. As if on cue, Ash, who had been sitting quietly at Nolan's feet, stood and padded over to the door, his tail wagging ever so slightly. Nolan looked down at the dog, a companion who had been with him through thick and thin, and knew in that moment that he was not alone. He reached for the door handle, feeling the cool wood beneath his fingertips. The decision had been made. It was time to move forward. He opened the door slowly, stepping outside. The light from the setting sun bathed the world in a soft, golden glow, casting long shadows across the field. The sky was painted with hues of orange and pink, and the air smelled fresh, alive with the scent of the earth and the promise of new beginnings. The journey was no longer about finding answers to what had been lost, but about embracing what was yet to come. Nolan felt a surge of strength within him, as though everything he had experienced, the house, the wind, the moments of revelation, had prepared him for this. He stepped into the field, his heart steady, his mind clear. Ash trotted ahead, his body moving with the same quiet confidence Nolan now felt. The two of them moved together, side by side, toward the distant horizon. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was theirs to walk. The sun dipped lower, casting its final rays over the land. As they reached the edge of the field, Nolan could see the outline of a distant mountain, its peaks shrouded in mist. The sight stirred something within him, an urge to continue, to push forward, to reach the place that was calling to him. This was no longer just about the house or the wind. This was about something far deeper, something that had been waiting for him his whole life. The wind picked up again, but this time, it was gentle, like a whisper. Nolan could almost hear it speaking to him, guiding him, urging him to keep moving. He glanced at Ash, whose head was lifted, ears alert, as though the dog too could hear the call of the wind. Together, they pressed forward, walking toward the mountain, toward whatever lay ahead. As they moved, Nolan's thoughts turned inward. He thought of the book, of the woman's words, of the choice that had brought him here. The truth wasn't always what they expected it to be, but it was always what they needed. That thought echoed in his mind as they walked, and he realized that the journey was never truly about finding something tangible. It was about the transformation, the way the journey itself shaped who they were meant to be. The wind, the house, the key, all had served their purpose, but now, it was time for him to shape his own path, to choose his own destiny. And as the last rays of the sun faded behind the horizon, Nolan knew that he was finally on the right path. The truth he had been searching for was no longer just a memory. It was a part of him now, something that would guide him forward. He felt the wind at his back, the steady presence of Ash beside him, and a sense of peace settling over him. The journey had led him here, and now, it was time for the next chapter to unfold. No matter what lay ahead, Nolan was ready. They both were. As Nolan and Ash approached the foot of the mountain, the landscape stretched wide before them, the horizon blending into a mixture of fading orange and pink from the setting sun. The crisp evening air carried a promise of something new, something that had been waiting for them both. The wind, which had been a constant guide throughout their journey, now whispered through the trees, gently urging them forward. Nolan's heart beat steady and sure, each step drawing him closer to the unknown, yet he no longer felt afraid. He had found something far more profound than answers to his questions. He had found purpose. Ash, his loyal companion, walked beside him, his sharp senses ever vigilant, guiding them with a quiet confidence. It was as if the two of them had become attuned to the rhythm of the world around them, working in sync with the forces that had brought them here. With every step up the mountain, Nolan felt a deeper connection to the land, to the energy that seemed to pulse through the earth beneath his feet. It was as if he had always been meant to walk this path, and now, he was finally stepping into the life that awaited him. As they neared the summit, the air grew thinner, colder, but the sense of peace remained constant, wrapping around them like a protective shield. The world below seemed to grow smaller, distant, as if they were nearing some sacred space, untouched by the chaos that had once clouded Nolan's mind. He stopped for a moment to catch his breath and looked out over the valley below. The house, the wind, the key, it was all connected, and now, as he stood at the peak, he understood. This was not just a physical journey, but a spiritual one that had healed the broken pieces of his soul. The world, in all its complexity, was unfolding before him, and he was ready to embrace it. The woman's words echoed in his mind. You have the strength to see what others cannot. She had been right. He had found the strength he never knew he had, not just in the answers he sought, but in the journey itself. Ash sat at his side, as if sensing the weight of the moment, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. Nolan's gaze followed, and in the distance, just beyond the crest of the mountain, he saw it. A small clearing, bathed in the light of the full moon. In the center of the clearing stood a single, ancient tree, its branches stretching wide into the sky. The tree's presence was both grounding and uplifting, a symbol of life, growth, and transformation. Nolan felt a pull, an undeniable need to go to it. He began to walk toward the clearing, Ash following at his heels, each step carrying him further into the unknown. As they reached the tree, Nolan stopped, feeling the energy of the place wash over him. The air was thick with the scent of earth, and the ground beneath him hummed with a quiet power. The tree stood as if it had been waiting for him, its gnarled roots deep in the soil, its branches reaching toward the heavens. Nolan reached out and placed his hand on the trunk, feeling the rough texture of the bark beneath his fingertips. A surge of warmth filled him, radiating outward from his hand and spreading through his entire body. The wind, now a soft, comforting breeze, swirled around them, its whispers carrying a message. This was the culmination of his journey. The answers were not just in the past or in the house or the key, but in the present, in the now. He had found peace, and with that peace, he found his purpose. Nolan closed his eyes for a moment, taking it all in, the wind, the tree, the world around him. He had come so far, and now, at the end of this chapter, he realized that it wasn't the destination that mattered, but the journey itself. He opened his eyes, his heart full of gratitude, and turned to Ash. The dog's amber eyes met his, and Nolan smiled. They had both come a long way together, and the path ahead, though uncertain, was theirs to walk. The wind picked up again, but this time, it didn't feel like a force pulling him forward. It felt like a gentle nudge, as though the world itself was telling him that everything was as it should be. As Nolan looked up at the stars, scattered across the sky like tiny pinpricks of light, he felt a deep sense of belonging. He wasn't lost anymore. He had found his way, and with that, he had found home. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, Nolan knew that he was exactly where he needed to be. Together, with Ash by his side, he was ready to face whatever came next. And as the night stretched on, Nolan stood tall, embracing the future with open arms, knowing that the winds would always guide him, wherever he went.